Let's talk about this Tamron 17-50 f2.8 lens. Let's start out with a little background. This is a lens built for Nikon DX cameras, Nikon's cropped sensor DSLR line. As a side note, you can use this lens on Nikon's FX full-frame bodies by using cropped sensor mode. On those bodies, the DX bodies and the FX bodies in cropped sensor mode, this 17-50mm lens will give you a 35mm effective field of view of about 25 to 75 millimeters. That's a nice mid-range, giving you a wide enough angle for landscapes, but then you can go to a normal field of view for street photography or group portraits, or zoom in for a great focal length for portraits. Plus, this is an f2.8 fixed aperture lens, which means that you have the ability to use f2.8, a nice wide aperture, throughout the zoom range. Let's talk physically using this lens. How does it feel? Is it easy to use? This is a pretty compact and lightweight lens as zooms go. Zooming in and out is smooth, and I don't feel like my hand has to travel too much to go from 17mm to 50mm. Basically, I'm not thinking about my lens when I'm using it, and it's not a distraction, which is a big plus in my book, since I'm often hiking around with my gear. Now, I did mention that it is a lightweight lens, and I like that because I do a lot of climbing mountains with my camera, but I should mention here why this lens is lightweight. It is plastic. The downside of that is that it isn't as robust as some of the more expensive Nikon brand lenses, which are made of metal. Those, however, are not only more expensive, but are heavier as well. So it's physically easy to use, but it's not exactly built like a tank. But I've been confident enough to take it out on the trails. How does it perform? The autofocus speed is great. I've been using the lens mostly on my D300S, but I've used it on several other bodies like the D50. I also used it on the D5000, but had to manually focus. This lens does not have a focus motor, so I could only use it on bodies that do have a focus motor. If you're shopping for this lens, make sure that you have a camera body that has a focus motor. If you aren't sure, your manual can tell you. Anyway, on the cameras where I was using autofocus, it quickly snapped into focus every time without fail. Now, this is one of those notorious third-party lenses. They sometimes get a bad rap with regard to image quality, so what about that? I took this guy on a tour around Flagstaff in northern Arizona. We went up Slate Mountain for sunrise. We walked around in the forest. We even took some portraits. I found that this little guy is no slouch. The image quality is great. Like most lenses, it's a little soft when shot wide open at f2.8, but becomes more and more crisp as you creep the aperture up to around f8. I found nothing to complain about. Okay, so it's easy to use, it's pretty robust, it performs great, but how much does it cost? The big benefit of a third-party lens is the cost. This little guy is only a few $100s, which is much less than Nikon's brand-named fixed aperture zooms. Why is that? Mainly build quality. While the build quality of this lens is perfectly acceptable for most users most of the time, the Nikon fixed aperture zooms are built to withstand more of a beating in tougher conditions. Now, Nikon has plenty of lenses with this same build quality in this same price range, but they're variable aperture lenses, so you won't be able to open up to f2.8 throughout the zoom range like you can with this Tamron. In fact, you won't even be able to open up to f2.8 when shooting even at the widest angle of those lenses. You'll have something closer to f3.5. All right, this lens is easy to use. It's robust enough to make it through a few hikes with me. It performs great. It's relatively inexpensive. Is there any downside to it? I do have one concern, and it's a concern that is common to any third-party lens. There is the potential for compatibility issues. When I purchase my brand new DSLR, I expect that I'll be able to use all of my lenses with it. However, with third-party lenses, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you have to update the lens's firmware, either by sending it into the manufacturer or by using a USB dock, which you purchase separately. That potentially means time with your new camera body, but without your 17-50 lens, or spending extra money on a dock. So would I recommend this lens? I would, but only if you go into the purchase with your eyes open. This is a fixed aperture zoom lens for only a few $100s. That's pretty awesome. But are there trade-offs? Sure, it isn't as durable as the similar fixed aperture Nikon brand zoom lenses. You may have temporary compatibility issues if you purchase a new camera body, but really, if those aren't things that are deal breakers for you, this is a lens that deserves a look. In my testing of this lens, I took a lot of pictures. You saw some of them in the review today, but there are more, and I have some posted on snapchick.com right now. Follow the link in the description of this video to find them, plus some extra photos and an additional video for my VIPs, where I talk a bit about the portrait shoot that I did with this lens.